Hello and welcome to today's webinar. This is the final installation in our Administrator's Data Playbook, Empowering Your Team with Information. We are excited for you to join us at the end of this journey. Today, your host will be Dr. Jeremy Wagner. He is one of our wonderful product managers here at Eduphoria, and my name is Tara Whedon. I am the Director of Teaching and Learning, and I will be here to moderate. This is a pre-recorded session, so any questions you have today, please submit in the Q&A and we will monitor those and get back to you as promptly as possible. And you will get a recording of this sent to your inbox within the next 48 hours. So again, any questions in the Q&A today, that way our team can review them after this has aired. Our goal with today's topic is to help you build a sustainable, action-oriented data culture using the tools available to you in Eduphoria. So as we've gone throughout this series, we've really focused on your data culture, what you're doing around data in your systems, what data you have access to. And today we're going to really make some things clear on what you can do with Eduphoria so you can leave this session with a very clear idea of what you would like to do next or how you might want to stage things out next school year, and bring things in with a lot of intentionality of how you would like to use them and how they align with that data philosophy you defined for yourself earlier in the year. To go through that today, we're going to start with a recap. So if you haven't been along the ride for this series, we're going to quickly recap the main points that we have touched throughout our time together. And then we're going to look at setting the standard, moving beyond the score, how you can take action, and giving you an opportunity for some calls to action and really looking at your playbook and how you could apply what you're learning here today. Before we jump into all of our content, we want to give a shout out to Taylor. She is on our marketing team and she has helped really lay the foundation for this series through an ebook that she published on Data 101 for new and developing administrators. So a lot of the content from this series is directly sparked by what she has in there. So it is a great opportunity for you to sit down, read through that. It'll refresh you on the content previously discussed in the series, as well as lock you into some key things you can do with the software that maybe you're already doing and you can leverage further, or maybe you haven't considered doing yet and you can really get some foundational understanding of how you could apply that in your practice. So this is a great resource for you to have in your hands and review as you engage with this content and look back throughout the series. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn things over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Tara. And yeah, I want to echo what you just said about Taylor. She did an excellent job. And like you said, we used that playbook that she put together to inspire this entire series. And so she's done a great job of making me sound particularly smart over these last several episodes that we've done in this webinar series. So like Tara said, we're going to go ahead and just start off by doing a review. The review, we're going to touch kind of because each of these phases that we've done so far have had some really critical things. And so I really want to encourage you. I am going to speak a bit about each of these parts up to now, but I really want to encourage you to go back and actually watch those recordings if you missed them, because having a data philosophy and making sure that it's well established is a foundational piece that can't be skipped. It's one thing to know how to use our software. It's one thing to know how to leverage it and do really cool things with it. It's a totally different thing to understand why you're doing it and making sure everyone is on the same page. So if you haven't had that chance yet, go make sure you look at those first three parts and make sure that foundation is as intentional and as solid as it needs to be. All right, so let's start that recap. We're going to reset the stage. This last part of our four-part series is really all about kind of looking at and leveraging those data visuals. But when we go back to part one and part two, we look at this series as a whole, which is helping us equip ourselves with the tools and the mindset to take first or next steps into effective data analysis. So whether you're actually brand new to this work or you're looking to actually sharpen your approach, the entire series hopefully left you with some clear strategies or something that you can take away to make data more meaningful and more actionable for your individual role. So when we look at understanding the foundations, a data philosophy acts as the foundation for all data-driven work, and it helps answer the why, the how, and the what for your data usage. It should align context for staff by defining the purpose of assessments, actually what the purpose of your purchase resources are, and what the purpose of your initiatives are that are related maybe across all three of those things. The process of building this foundation involves 10 essential steps. And I'm not going to go into every single step, but at a high level, it begins with establishing a goal that is going to drive your action, and then creating a dream team of data collection people and analysis gurus. And that team drafting a list of objectives and beliefs and expectations that can make your philosophy tangible. It's like what you actually do to pull the data together and make use of it, and how often you're doing it, and guiding the questions that you have for the analysis processes. And then ultimately, a strong foundation is necessary because all of this is hard at first, but it is a time saver in the long run. We have to recognize again a district to team structure and alignment within this. Data philosophy should exist at all levels, the district level, the school level, and the team level, each with varying context and boundaries. The district level is the least restrictive. It focuses on those whys and expectations, allowing for the school level to have some customization. The school level follows that district framework, but it's flexible enough for the school's personality and processes to come through that are unique to them to weigh in on assessment data or even personal professional development creation, recognizing this simple truth that one size does not fit all. And then finally, at the team level, it involves actually doing that work. This is where that rubber meets the road. You're establishing those norms, following the pace, you're doing the assigned work. It requires a fine-tuned approach that is consistently modeled, reinforced, and monitored by the levels above, but is enacted at this team level. Then we identified the benefits of data clarity. By creating a clear data philosophy and ensuring data clarity directly leads to several benefits. Those include making it easier for staff to actually do their jobs and reaching their goals, supporting student success through more informed decisions. The long-term benefit is saving time, of course, by avoiding confusion and inconsistent practices. Clarity is achieved through the planning and execution steps of that 10-step process, which involves creating a message for your framework, establishing clear procedures and eliminating kinks in the system, and reinforcing those procedures with professional learning. The overall message is that an informed philosophy ensures you are using time and resources wisely and strengthening teaching and learning as you're going. And then we initiate purposeful data conversations. Those data conversations are initiated by active communication and execution of the data philosophy that you've created. Once the framework is built, you must actually send that message out and then handle logistics from there, such as scheduling meetings, make sure things get the attention they need, etc. This is a critical time to consider your campus or school or even district culture, your team, school, or district culture. Is your staff ready to actually hear that goal? And are you prepared to take something off of your staff members' plates to make room for this? Finally, conversations and practices are sustained by actually monitoring your data philosophy to make sure that, progress checks, documentation, feedback loops are established. Doing walkthroughs on PLCs is a fundamental thing that you could do in your structure where you can actually look at and monitor how this is unfolding in an action research oriented kind of approach. Part two was all about tracking down your data and actually like finding it, locating it, and doing something with it. We took a deep dive into identifying trends and what those trends meant. It's one thing to know that we need to look at data and understand why it's important, but it's different to understand what you're trying to do with the data once it's actually in front of you. You have to find that data, look at it, put it side by side in many instances, and then look for patterns. You have to ask yourself questions about what's going up, what's going down, what does that mean, what's staying the same. And in each of those cases, what do those changes actually correlate to in terms of instructional impact and student success? Recall that always going up isn't always good, and always going down isn't always bad. For example, scores going up, that's great. Absences going up, not so great. We discussed outliers. Outliers are those little extra data points that stand out as strange or they break the pattern. Again, we talked about in part two that there are important questions that should surface when you find outliers. If we line up the data and we see generally a cluster or line of data points, and then there's a handful way off to the side, below the line, above the line, off by themselves, that means something. Don't just ignore them. But what does it mean? What can we learn from that? Why are these exceptions actually existing and how can we address those? And in some cases, addressing them doesn't mean eliminating them. It might mean learning from them and trying to enact some, interesting practice that surfaced and hadn't been thought of before. And finally, we spent some time talking about articulating problem areas. All of the trends help you identify areas of concern, but also areas of strength. These areas of concern need immediate attention, but may also require a sort of triage approach. So, what's going to give you the most bang for your buck? Look at that thing first. If everything's important, remember, if everything's important, then nothing is important. So, you have to actually identify where you're going to focus. We have to clearly and plainly define those areas that we want to address and articulate action plans informed by insights from that data to address those areas through strategic improvement. But we also have to highlight those successes. If all we ever do is not feel good enough with what we're doing, then we never feel like we're making progress. So take the time to notice great trends and point those out and celebrate them. Part three was where we were actually identifying trends in those data, or in those data points. We took a deep dive into identifying trends and what that means. It's one thing to know that we need to look at that data and understand that it's important, but it's a different task to understand what you're trying to do with that data once it's in front of you. You have to find that data, look at it, put it side by side in many instances, like I said before, and then ask yourself, what are those trends? What am I pulling out of it? Are there distractors? Are there instructional connections I can make with this? And we focused that data trend in a couple of areas, single test analysis and multi-test analysis. And while those are aware premium features only, they really are super powerful, providing those visuals and helping you dig through the PLC process and identify answers to all of those questions. Now, to sum all that up, we spent the first two sessions looking at about actually having and finding your data. Then our third session moved to discuss using that data. Today we're going to focus our attention on architecting the data that you actually want to collect and doing so without necessarily relying fully on Aware Premium. So your philosophy has been defined, your staff has been mobilized to doing things. We got to keep information flowing by using the right tool for the right purpose because we all know that there's truth in W. Edward Deming's quote that was popularized by Stephen Covey. Your system is perfectly designed for the results that you are receiving. That can be a hard truth to swallow. There are going to be a series of calls to action sprinkled throughout this presentation. So your job will be to decide which of these is the next best step for you to empower your teams or one that best meets your needs right this moment. All right, so let's start with setting the standard. We're looking at tools for better test building because after all, your data is only as good as the tests helping you get that data. So our objective for this particular segment is to briefly look at and identify specific tools that make test creation faster and more consistent across all classrooms. We're trying to use time-saving tools here to help build consistency. Let's go ahead and do kind of like we did with our last session. We're going to tie our presentation through the lens of the PLC questions. We did that side by side with single test analysis and the Aware Premium, other Aware Premium features, and I highly recommend if you have Aware Premium to do that. But if you didn't catch part three, go check that out. So that PLC, those series of questions, they actually provide a wonderful framework here for how data processes and assessment processes lead to action steps that impact instruction. And that's the point here. Actions are only as good as your data. Data is only as good as your data philosophy, and your data is only as good as your assessments. So when we look at the PLC question, the first one that we need to address is what do we want students to learn? And it's closely tied to that assessment, specifically the quality of the assessment. Aware in general helps you answer this question. High quality assessments that produce meaningful data analysis is the key. There are many ways that we're going to discuss that how you can save time in the assessment creation process while also creating consistent routines across all classrooms. You may already be using assessments in Aware for your higher stakes, like local assessments such as benchmarks that will mirror state testing, or district common assessments that are aligned with improving goals for your schools. Aware is also an amazing formative assessment tool that teachers can use with students weekly or even daily to create routines for measuring student learning. And so, really think about the varied ways that you can do standard assessments, rubric based assessments, inventories, or even post assessment activities at the teacher level to get into the nitty gritty of the daily learning. One highlight of our assessment platform is that Eduphoria offers both traditional test items, such as multiple choice or constructed response, and the interactive response items, like your drag and drops and your multi-part items. With over a dozen item types, you're sure to find the right way to actually measure student learning. Some of these items offer the flexibility to be used across print and digital assessments. Items can be paired with a resource like a reading passage. Eduforia's interactive response items offer a dynamic way for students to demonstrate their thinking and help teachers assess skills that cannot be captured with simple multiple choice questions. Today, we're just going to scratch the surface of what Aware's assessment design can actually manage for you. Our online help guides are very rich with resources and information on how to create each of these item types. So don't just trust, hey, this exists, and then never look at it again. Go look into how to actually utilize them and build these items so that your kids can have varied assessment. To help with consistency across classrooms, digital assessments also have various test settings that should be managed. Students will have the opportunity to practice strategies year round, such as using like the scratch pad to think through a problem and make calculations with the same calculator that they use in class or online if you're an online one-to-one based district. Your district may also opt to use features such as question randomization or the lockdown browser to minimize the chance of students receiving outside help. These settings also allow for you to turn on the student score summary, which will provide a rich practice of students reviewing their performance and can be an informative step of the feedback cycle that we're going to discuss here in a few minutes. So if any of these things feel unfamiliar to you, like the scratch pad or question randomization or calculators for online testing, use this link at the bottom of this slide once you get this to actually look at each of these settings and how to use them. And I cannot emphasize the importance more of the score summary window and how that plays a vital part in students' formative understanding of their own learning. Test creation can be conducted even more quickly when districts are provided with access to vetted curriculum aligned item banks or assessment items. Districts may elect to purchase banks or may have access to QTI items or pre-built assessments from their curriculum providers. Using these item banks allows teachers and other assessment authors to select fully formed items and even fully formed tests that have already got the information like the learning standards, the depth of knowledge level identified, and that means each time that an item is used, it is measuring the same thing for every student in every classroom in your district, and you didn't have to make it. This will simplify your data conversations when you know that you're looking at the same assessment for every single teacher. That's where the common formative assessment practices really come in. We recently highlighted a lot more details on this topic in a webinar, and I'd really encourage you to go check that out once you receive these slides as well. Now, custom banks, I mentioned them very briefly a second ago with QTI packages. Custom banks is where you actually take those QTI packages, and it's one of our newer features and lets you bring those items in through our custom bank solution. It helps educators customize your assessment libraries by importing that third-party content and then lets you control it with various security settings. So let's go a little deeper with some of the parameters of custom banks and how those things help save you time and create consistency across your classrooms. Custom banks allow a district to create individualized, custom named banks from a QTI package or packages that they receive from those curriculum vendors. So, for example, if you work with HMH, they can provide a QTI package with some of their options that you may or may not have purchased, and then you can get those items straight into our system. They're imported into our system and then become available to add to assessments via the custom bank options in the bank selector dropdown. You can see that in the image here on the left. And from there, it's just a simple matter of finding the items that are in the system that match the assessment that you're trying to give. I do want to caution anyone using QTI for importing items, though. QTI isn't a perfect process, so make sure that you vet those items for content, format, and usability before giving those tests to students that use those items. Beacon also has a way to help you bring your assessments into your lesson plans. Beacon is our new tool for lesson planning and curriculum management with special emphasis on the curriculum management. If you have Aware and Beacon, all you need to do is actually click and drag assessments in the UI and then add it to a block in your plan. This is a really helpful way when it comes to actually doing those action steps for any assessment program because it's one thing to have solid assessments, it's another to ensure that the right assessments are being given at the right time, and Beacon really helps you with that. Here's also a quick screenshot of what that actually looks like in Beacon. You can see the assessments listed out on the right where the hand is hovering, and with a summary of the standards that are actually covered on that assessment, and then you literally click it and drag it straight into your planner box. That brings us to our first call to action. This one's for our teachers. That call to action is it's time to use an assessment system that honors your time and provides student scores immediately. Select a standard from a unit you have coming up pretty soon, or if you're watching this recording later in your current unit that you're teaching right now, and create a standard assessment with just 5 items. Go pick that one standard and get started. Obviously, many of you are probably already doing this and quite a bit more with your assessment platform, even with Eduphoria and our author tool. But I want to tie this call to action back to the quality of the assessments. It's always great to get back to the roots of assessment making with something small, something formative. Other people can actually do this too, even at the district level, to have access to test building and take this action step with you, and maybe pilot this with a small number of classrooms if you feel unsure about how to proceed and into this world of assessment writing, especially for super formative purposes. It's a great way for teachers to get formative insights during that unit of instruction before a larger district or school level assessment is scheduled to be administered. Our next topic is looking beyond the score and then listening to your students. Surface level quantitative data is an absolutely fabulous and useful tool. It can give you a lot of insights. But what else can we do to dig in just a little bit deeper? Our second objective for this segment is to use specific tools to track student progress over time and identify where they need additional support. And that actually brings us to the next PLC question in our framework for today. And let's examine some options in Aware that help answer this question. How will we know the students, actually learned what we wanted them to know? The easiest way to start answering that question is with a quick view or with single test analysis. We did single test analysis last webinar, so again, go check that recording. But in quick views, you get to customize the data the way that makes the most sense to you and your teachers. You get to slice and dice that data by scores, by demographics, by accommodation usage, and apply a variety of other filters to that data. Like I mentioned before, we did single test analysis for data visuals, but quick views can sometimes have an edge on STA if you're willing to export that data and actually augment what you're looking at with your own custom built graphs and charts using spreadsheet software. I remember in my days in the district, that was something I often did because I had different ways of thinking through the data and creating visuals for me and my teams. One of the more powerful and sometimes less used quick view templates is the student learning standard breakdown. This one comes with some actual color coding that can help you decide where areas of success and areas of caution and areas of concern lie. When you look at this screen, don't look for names, just look for colors. If you see an entire column of red, like we kind of see here on the left, there's a little bit of orange, but it's mostly red there. Um, You've just found your PLC agenda for next Tuesday, or if for your back to school training in August, if you're at that point of the year. Quick Views turns your data from a look back at what happened into a look forward at what to do next, which is really the key. It's only an autopsy of the data if you look at it, take note of a particular problem, and then don't respond. To turn that into a checkup instead of an autopsy, make note of what you might be able to do to remediate the gaps in learning and then do something about that. You also have the option to use the edit button that we have circled here at the top to enhance your data view with additional columns, which could reveal more information about how students performed on the assessment. And you can send this data view to your team to help them prepare for your next data discussions. Use that send button whenever you find it's necessary or relevant. Okay, so now let's get a deep dive into some advanced quick view creation. You can always use the four base templates, but what kinds of templates could you create or other templates that your district has created for you that can help you do a various different kind of layer in your analysis? So I've opened up a quick view tab here with some dummy data. This is not real student information. This data was just kind of randomly generated with some random names that we put together. So in here, these are the four basic views that come with any just base start with quick views. You got your student scores, your reporting category breakdown, your learning standard breakdown, and the individual responses. You can then really start getting into some customized, different ways of creating and even leveraging the editing portions and saving data views to give you something really unique and different. An example one that we built here is the student response strips. This view is one that can be printed out, chopped into strips, and handed to the students for their own analysis if you're into a pen and paper style kind of student self-analysis. I'll show you real fast what those look like. The first tab here is your tests, and you can pull in multiple tests if you like, but the second tab is where the money and magic really start happening. All of these folders you can expand, and you start clicking and dragging various fields in here that help you make the view that you want. So with this test strip one, we've got the question number, the individual student response, their correct response, and whether or not the student was correct. And once we had that going, we moved it from this option on the right for compare across groups to compare across tests. And that kind of shifted it. So it went horizontal. This is a really powerful way that you can actually look at a data piece with your students in a way that isn't just a default. That is a saved view. You can use those options here to actually save it, name it, and potentially even share it depending on your rights and access within your areas. Another really great one is you don't even have to make and save. Just remember, I can maybe go to, let's say, the student individual responses. Student individual response just shows me on this test my standards, my students, how they did. But I also know or want to know, hey, are my kids actually using the supports that I wanted them to use for online testing? So I'm going to come to edit. I'm going to go to the online administration, and I might drag in these fields on spelling usage, text to speech, content clarifiers, calculator usage, speech to text. And then I'll hit update and hopefully see some data on whether or not the kids were actually using those things in these fields. Now, again, this is dummy data. If they used it, you'd have different numbers than zeros, but I think you get the general idea. Um, one more really powerful one. Let's go back to a student score, and we've got individual students, and I want to look at the performance levels. Well, I can come in here to edit, and we can actually apply filters to our levels here by clicking add filter and say I want it to equal yes. I'm going to hit check. And now it's going to apply that filter, and it's going to filter that down to students that only got yes on approaches. Of course, with meets and masters, how that works, it also got me a lot of kids that were in meets, but notice there is one no on our masters here. So this is filtered down to just the kids that got my approaches. I can then use that to actually generate, if I need to, a student access list and click that button straight away. And every kid that I filtered down to gives me a different way to layer my analysis. So those are just a few quick tips that you might look at to try to beef up or amplify how it is that you're using quick views at its basis. Again, I love single test analysis. I love multi-test analysis, but quick views has the most powerful ways for if you're willing to really get curious and really dive in and start dragging fields in to slice and dice data in ways you probably never even imagined you could. All right, so let's go back. Here's a tip related to assessments and answering that PLC question. How will we know that they learned it? Sometimes students have learning trends in an assessment that can be related to the provision or lack of supports. I showed you how to drag those fields in for the supports just a second ago. Some students must have those supports as part of their IEP or 504 plan, but every student can benefit from some of these accommodations at some time in their education experience in your classrooms. Double check that your online assessments are structured to meet the needs of every student. Make sure that the online testing tools are embedded across all subjects and electives, and make sure calculations are available, such as and make sure tools are available, such as calculators, The scratch pad, line readers, and other accessibility features are turned on as appropriate. And don't forget to check out the student supports like text-to-speech, content clarifiers, and speech-to-text. You can also do those main ones that require typically some sort of approval process or check mark in a student's profile by looking at the student supports table. This is available for anyone with the right to manage student supports in Aware. It gives a really accessible way to take a deep dive into your student supports and lets you manage them right here in this interface rather than having to edit things one student at a time in a student profile or doing massive uploads, which you absolutely can still do and encourage you to do. Um, but you can search for students, filter things by subject, by school, by support, and just verify the overall support health for your assessment program. I'm not going to into a ton of depth here right now, but check out our online help guides on how to use this report and how to manage student supports on a large scale from this piece. It's also worth noting here that we did include pagination. So down here at the bottom, you can actually change the number of kids that you see. This is an extreme example, 83,000 students, but you get the idea here that I can show a list of kids or even apply filters to include kids that have no supports to do that kind of cross check. As a quick recap of what's available in Aware in terms of supports, let's just list each of these out in terms of just basic test features and supports we offer, just in case you might not be aware of some of them. As you can see in our basic, we have a highlighter, color theme, strike through option, zoom, the resource view, that's where you can expand the passage and take up the whole page and then collapse it. You have reference documents, notes, question guides, and a flag for later option. Every single student gets those basic online test features. So make sure your kids know how to use them. Then you have your accessibility features. These are ones that can be turned on assessment at a time. So you've got calculators, lockdown browser, line reader, a ruler, spelling assistant, scratch pad, question randomization, the online dictionary, and the ability to review and submitted responses. And then your student-specific supports, the ones that have to be assigned to each student individually. You've got your text-to-speech, your content clarifiers, Spanish accommodations, calculator. Notice that's also in the accessibility features because you have the option to make a calculator for everyone on the entire test, say like eighth grade math. All eighth grade math students get a calculator, so turn it on for all at the test. Or a calculator is available for this kid no matter what, and that's that student-specific support. Spelling assistance and speech to text. Providing the supports and accommodations are only going to provide as much help as the student's preparation to use them. I mentioned this just a second ago, so ask yourself this question. Were you aware of the fact that a scratch pad was available for assessments? If that's new to you, your students don't know how to use the scratch pad. Do your students know how to use the content clarifiers effectively? Do they know why they're beneficial for them to use? Do they have practice with recognizing how to use some of those various tools? Think through a plan to double check if students not only know how to use these tools, but why and when they should use them. Talk about using the testing features routinely and how students know how to use them may have a big impact on the data that you review. Remind your students that certain elements can be directly reviewed in the data sets themselves, like in single test analysis. Student confidence is available there. Quick Views has the ability for you to review support usage. As an extension, it's worth calling out that we've got a blog post about writing fair assessments for diverse learners. Check out the link at the bottom of this slide when you actually get that deck and consider some of the suggestions offered and explore one or two of them at a time to ensure your tests are in a position that allows students to show what they know with the tools that they have available to them so they can show you just as good as they can do. And that brings us to the next BLC question. What will we do if the students didn't or don't learn it? It's important to utilize the tools that we've discussed and the approaches we've mentioned to identify students in various performance groups. It's not enough to identify just the struggling students, but we also have to identify which students are on the cusp of the next performance level. What would your data look like, for example, if every single student grew by 2 questions? Not just the kids down low growing 5 questions. What if every single student grew by 2 questions? You can use Aware to help you generate and monitor by those student groups straight from the data source. Doing this can help you make instructional decisions to really answer that PLC level question, what do we do if the students didn't learn it? So let's talk about monitor groups. This is where these really come into play. You can make monitor groups straight out of a single test analysis view by actually filtering down to students by performance levels or by demographic. You can also make them on the fly in the monitor group section of Aware on the left, in the left navigation. Do you already know which students you want to focus on based on a particular demographic, such as a student being at risk? Do you want to get students with certain accommodations grouped together for analysis? Are you noticing patterns with current or historical data and want to group students together based on their historical performance? Monitor groups is a perfect place for you to begin creating those lists of students so that that data can be sliced in directly into a quick view or into a single test analysis view by applying that group as a pre-made filter. This can be especially useful when looking at data to help identify common misconceptions or challenges that can be addressed in the instructional setting. Let's extend this a little more by looking at post-assessment activities. These offer a great solution for teachers to respond to that third PLC question. What do we do when the kids don't get it? This is an action step that's easy. Of course, the first thing is to identify those gaps, identifying the kids that have those gaps, and identifying the why that those gaps exist. Then that next step is to actually perform some kind of remediation. We're going to look at this in the assessment cycle here in just a minute. We can help with finding the gap, finding the kids, and even grouping the kids, and potentially even helping you identify why that gap exists. But remediation is a teacher-owned thing. Once the remediation is done, what do you do to go back and see if the kids got it? The answer could be post-assessment activities. These are formative practices that help educators target learning gaps and create healthy feedback cycles surrounding assessment to promote student ownership of learning. So whether you're using these features or not, you're probably engaged in these practices already. Here we have the feedback cycle, which typically starts with a student taking a test. That's where the asterisk is in our cycle. After that, you do the data analysis, you identify strengths and gaps, and then we ask students to reflect on their learning. This particular step in that cycle often gets overlooked on a day-to-day basis in our daily practices and is where post-assessment activities can really help bridge the gap. More on that in just a second. Then student groups are identified, reteach and practice is given, and then a retest or reassessment of some kind is given. This is the other step that post-assessment activities can really help with. Notice the bold, reflect, bold, retest. The purpose of a reflection activity, which is the first type of post-assessment activity, is to get students thinking about their learning and their performance prior to reteaching. It essentially primes the learner before the next steps in the cycle continue. You have to think about assignments. You have to think about questions. Are those questions straight from a test? Are they questions that you give them for open-ended? Are they multiple choice? The point is you want them to be thinking about their learning and thinking about what happened in the exam and them using that to maybe set goals. The system is designed to have one reflection per test, and this is kind of what that looks like. If you're an Aware Premium customer, you have access to the post-assessment activities, which offer those two additional assessment types, reflection and retest. So after you've given that assessment, the teacher is able to create a reflection activity that students can access in their online testing login. These reflections are linked to the assessments directly that they've already completed and are linked to the score summary window. So as long as the window is open and the test has been taken, the teacher can create multiple choice or open-ended response type questions to ask students to reflect on their learning. They can set a goal for correcting those learning gaps, or they can just have a direct communication line for their needs to the teacher. Reflection responses can be checked in single test analysis, which is another premium feature, to gather that feedback and then use it to build student groups for remediation or enrichment. This is that other qualitative piece I mentioned earlier in the presentation. It's one thing to have data, it's another thing to get the kids to help inform you about their needs and what's going on. Reflection data is then available in STA, like I said, where you can see what the students actually typed back to you on those reflection questions that you asked, or answer if you gave a multiple choice type question. Here you can refine your remediation, or you can enrich your plans based on those students' responses and even gather goals from those students themselves. So after the reflection comes the option to reassess, or as many districts and schools actually call it, we want to make corrections to the test. And so you kind of have to ask yourself, how do you handle test corrections in your district? Specifically, do they get credit for those corrections or not? Districts have various ways of handling test corrections or makeups, and when it comes to granting credit, this is likely outlined in your district or school policy. So let's look at some of these steps. Option one. Option one, typically, and this isn't all encompassing, but option one, we allow students to make test corrections in Aware, but only apply credit in the gradebook. That has some risk because it could potentially change the data that was originally done. Option two, we make a copy of the assessment and have students enter their answers based on the copy. This is going to reflect a grade for each submitted assessment and then allows the teacher to enter the desired grade in the grade book. Here you retain some data integrity. Option three is do nothing, but we allow this process to support learning and teachers kind of do it on their own on the fly. Well, there's another option now. It's aware retests. Retest is the other post-assessment activity that lets a teacher create a brand new assessment linked to the original test, but not overriding the original test, and uses a blueprint to create another opportunity to demonstrate student learning. The biggest challenge educators face with retesting students is finding or building a new test. Well, if you have item banks in Eduphoria, you can use those banks through retest to find similar items on the same standards and same DOK to create a new test on the same content without putting the original scores at risk and without having to spend hours actually creating that test. So let's talk a little bit more about what retests look like in Aware and how they save teachers time to help create consistency across classroom. The retest feature offers teachers the chance to build a retest using the original test as a blueprint. Retest references the original test content and rigor via DOK, and then combs through an item bank that has been designated for teacher tests and finds similar items. This creates a test that has a very similar feel and covers the same content without giving the students the same exact questions over again that they saw before. This can save the teacher a ton of time, assuming the item banks are available and similar items can be found. But even if items can't be found, the retest questions are still fully customizable and it provides you a great skeleton as a leaping point to create questions if needed. Another big benefit of retest is that the test is essentially a new teacher test. All data from a retest is kept separate from the original test, so the retest opportunity can be given without overriding that district level data. All right, last but not least in our PLC framework is what will we do if the students already know it? This happens from time to time and honestly becomes one of the least visited questions in the PLC because if we're being honest, the education system itself is set up to worry more about kids not getting it than the kids that do get it. So let's take a look at this question. Aware's Mastery Tracker feature helps teachers to track standards mastery over time in a more meaningful way. It takes into account desired mastery performance thresholds, standard depth of knowledge, and provides a great set of reports that can be used to correlate data that's been observed in the class with data actually found in our system. So we built Mastery at the beginning to actually answer this exact question. How can we track and visualize mastery data over time? Well, Standards Mastery is a student monitoring solution to help do that. It helps educators set perceptions based on recent data and track that mastery of standards over time and view the data and slice it out by the standard and by DOK. Here's a good example of what that looks like. While I won't go into depth on all of the things a Mastery Tracker can do, this visual gives you a really solid idea. Mastery Trackers allow you to grab students from your monitor groups or from your rosters and you start linking tests to them. The tracker will then take all of the data at the standards level across all of those assessments and give you two pieces of information for every single student. It'll give you the latest raw score and the total raw score. If a standard is tested multiple times, the total raw score tells you the story of its entirety, whereas the latest raw score lets you know if the kid demonstrated mastery and understands the content the most recent time that that test was given. This can be really helpful to identify mastery for students that are struggling. But also helps you highlight students that are really getting it. Once they're identified and you can pinpoint strengths, it's up to the educators to decide how to provide those layers of differentiation in the classroom. There are a variety of ways to slice and dice that data in Mastery as well. So go check out our online help guides and look at the 4 different views that the Mastery Trackers allow you to have. This is our next call to action. This one's for our school leaders. Now is a great time to reflect on where teachers may be stuck with those PLC questions. If your next PLC meetings with teachers, try to take a moment to reflect on the feedback cycle to determine where teachers need the most support to ensure student learning. And then take that information and try to remove those barriers. Come back to this webinar, come back to the entire series and start finding out where can those barriers be removed and how can we use a data philosophy and how can we use these calls to actions and the various things that Aware provides you or even Beacon provides you and use those to help streamline efforts and keep things focused on where it's going to benefit kids the most. We can also use Strive conferences to help leverage what we bring from the PLCs and identify it as needs through something like Strive conferences. With Strive conferences, we can actually connect district and campus goals to those teacher growth plans in a very intentional and specific way. So you can simplify and scale your professional learning through flexible planning, personalized learning tracks. You can automate registration with QR codes, and you can have multiple presenters at a time going all at the same time. You can see within Strive when you create a conference, your options to actually have multiple sessions, different locations, learning tracks that can be customized and added to the summer PD plans. It gives opportunities for contributors to actually put forth ideas and information into these areas before they're published or even after they're published. And it lets the teachers get individualized learning sessions as if they'd gone to ISTE or CAST or some other major conference. We can use learning tracks to plan the and guide user selections through a conference. We create tracks that help educators search and find what they need, including area ways to search by subject area, by grade level. You can assign user groups like administrators or instructional coaches or paras so that they know, hey, I'm a para or I'm a coach. This session is important for me. You have overarching topics like assessments, technology, differentiation, anything like that. It's fully customizable where users can help find a balance in the user interface that gives them enough to help them narrow down the selections and guide them to what they actually need. So there's not as many, not so many choices that people are overwhelmed by options. Here's the next call to action. This is for the audience of professional learning. Professional learning isn't a linear path where all staff members need to be met with a single session. So create a little mini conference for your next campus PLC day, or at least two different session options to allow a sort of customized learning path for what people are going to need for what they need to grow. This all-in-one tool helps you manage those professional events and helps you build a single day event with multiple sessions or even multiple day events. All right, so that's your data playbook. Getting out what you put into it is kind of the key. It's everything we've talked about from the beginning up to now. Your assessments are only going to be as good as your philosophy, and your philosophy is only going to be as good as the preparation you put into it. Your data is only going to be as good as your assessments. And remember, your system is perfectly designed for the results you are receiving. Take a moment to reflect on that thought and really dive into how can I make changes so that we get different results. That probably means different systems. So what can I do next? Complete a call of action. That's probably the first and easiest thing. We put those out there as small pieces of biteable like challenges for you to get out there and just do something to get the rubber actually moving on the road. Share a call of action with a colleague. You don't have to do this by yourself. Pull someone in with you and try to find a way to make things move together. Select a self-guided demonstration. We have resources linked all throughout this presentation and on various resources that Tara will tell you about here in just a few moments as we close out our session here today, where you can actually go in and do some self-guided learning on what's going on in Aware and how to use it. You can visit eduphoria.com/resources for one of those self-guided demonstration and a slew of other resources to tack into for yourself, for your campus, or for your entire district. And then schedule your back to school training with your team. We're recording this right now during the summer, so make sure you get in that back to school training schedule. Or if you're seeing this as a recording later in the year, look at your training days coming up in your school district and prepare for some of this on one of those days. Once you get this slide deck, these buttons are actually clickable where you can choose a self-guided demonstration. I'll give you an example. I'm going to click on single test analysis. It'll open a tab and it's going to give me a guided tour where I can go through step by step and actually see, hey, this is what single test analysis is all about. So use this menu for yourself and for your staff as a great resource. This is another one where you can review Strive. Choose the self-guided demonstration for how to do electronic signatures, scripted comments, creating a goal, signing an evaluation. So much is here, and please never hesitate to reach out and ask for help from support. Last but not least, actually, I probably need to turn this over to you.
All right. So Jeremy has shared so much rich content today. We want to leave you again with additional resources that you can engage with at whatever time makes the most sense for you and your data philosophy and where you are in that journey of your implementation. So he just showed you a beautiful product walkthrough. And here is another blog. So a lot of our topic today was around those PLC questions and looking at what are we going to do when we need to intervene with our students and what do we need to do when we need to enrich our students. So we have another blog here that will help you dive into those aspects of your PLC conversations with a lot of strategies and ways to connect what you heard Jeremy talk about today and then give you another angle to hear from that with this blog. So it's a great companion depending on where you're getting started with the content in today's webinar. Okay, if there's any questions that are lingering on you, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. We'll be able to send those over to our team and get back to you. So drop those in if there's anything still on your mind that you would like our team to follow up with you on, or reach out to training@eduphoria.net that you see here on the screen. As always, we are part of your dedicated success ecosystem. We have many, many resources, as mentioned here this afternoon, as well as also listed here on the screen for you. So we engage in webinars routinely that we invite you to join us live for. We also offer on-site training. And our training is tailored to your needs. So we want to make sure that wherever you are on your journey with Eduphoria, we are able to help accelerate you from that point. We also offer digital learning online, as well as our knowledge base, which is a great point. Several articles were linked throughout this presentation that will help you look at exactly the how-to. So Jeremy talked a lot about the philosophy and the practical application through the PLC questions. If you're like, I just need to know where to go and click on my screen to get to this feature and get started, that is why you go to the online help guide. It's going to let you know exactly those explicit steps to take you to the next screen. While Jeremy and our webinars and our training are going to package that with how to, when to, why to. But if you need those practical step-by-steps, that online help guide is going to be your support. And then as always, our support team is always ready to take your questions, help you with any technical troubleshooting that may occur in your day through our support@eduphoria.net. And then as we mentioned, that digital resource that we have, we are actually in the process of revamping that for you. So stay tuned. In the near future, we will have an even quicker way for you to access this. We often hear when we share about our teacher learning site that many of you are not aware that this rich piece of content exists. So we are currently have our sleeves rolled up. We are elbow deep in cleaning this up, making it an even stronger experience for you for back to school. So stay tuned. Near future, we will be sharing with you how to access that and hopefully getting more and more of your teachers and other staff access to these learning materials that they can go through as their time allows. It's short, bite-sized pieces of information so they can really target what do I need to do next, which resource is going to help me do that, and then get right back to teaching, which is what we are all protecting their time to be able to do. And then coming up very, very soon on July 15th, we have our Eduphoria conference. So we hope that you will join us there. It is going to be out of this world. We just released our session list. So if you follow us on social media, which will have those links here in just a moment, you'll be able to see some of our presenters and the topics that will be available. Again, that is July 15th, our Eduphoria conference. And then here are those socials. We would love for you to stay connected with us. We share things about our upcoming webinars. You'll be the first to know about the blogs sent out and our newsletters, and stay up to date with lots of tips to continue to help you explore what is at your fingertips in the world of Eduphoria. And then lastly, here's where you can see all of our published webinar content. As we record things, we post them here so that you can access them at your leisure. We thank you for your time here today, and we hope that you have enjoyed this series. You'll get a brief feedback opportunity to let us know if this is a topic you want to hear more of, or what other topics you do want to hear about. And we would love to have you give us a little bit of information on how this is serving your needs.